Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, this is from mamamia.com.au. So maybe this is from Australia, possibly? It was a safe haven for abusive people. Joe grew up in a cult. This is what he wants you to know. September 26, 2024. Senior writer Nicole Madigan. Sounds to me like a safe haven for pedos. You guys know that's what it is, right? Cute guy. Content warning. This article contains descriptions of child sexual and physical abuse. Joe Dagaford's Canadian father was living in Australia, busking on the streets, when he met Joe's mom. Was this the flirty fishing? He invited her to a barbecue run by his church group, the Children of God. At the time, they were feeling disenchanted with the world and were desperately seeking a sense of belonging. They found it within the church. That barbecue set the tone for Joe's life and the life of his siblings, all of whom were born as active members of the church. I was born in Canada and moved to Australia as a 1-year-old, says Joe. We lived in Australia, New Zealand, and India for my first 11 years of life. The family was constantly moving, but always within the confines of the church, a global operation that still exists to this day. We lived in a caravan for a couple of years, communes, even in a tent for a while. By the time he was 12, Joe had lived in 52 different locations. Each location had one thing in common, though. They were cut off from the outside world. Everyone lived in communes, share houses, etc., and then there would be gatherings of multiple communes and members from larger areas from time to time, he says. It was led by regular mail-outs and publications from the upper leadership, who were always in a secret location and no one knew exactly where they were. Yeah, like the authorities, they never know, do they? Mail would mostly come from Switzerland. Switzerland. It reminds me of that. I always forget his name. Professor that exposed the octagon. Go look for the octagon. And the professor that he really revealed a lot of stuff. If I can think of his name later, I'll let you guys know. For some reason, it's a Swiss name, but I have trouble with that name. A facade of simplicity and dedication to God. Life for members of the Children of God was routine-based and heavily controlled. Each day was made up of prayer meetings, devotions, or whole house sessions run by the home leaders. the people selected to be in charge of those living within the confines of the home, which often included multiple families. Then it was jobs, lots of housework and childcare, shares Joe. As there were so many kids, the older ones were constantly caring for the younger ones. Huh, like the nurseries they have in Scientology? And still do? They still do, by the way. They're just hiding them. Joe ran the dishes crew for the 3 daily meals, and at just 9 years old, could be running teams of up to 15 children. We had to keep quiet and hide most of the time, so that no one outside the house knew how many people lived there, he shares. Kind of like how when the LAPD shows up at the Scientology Blue buildings, they don't go in to investigate because people told them they can't go in. Like, is that like, I'm like, are you serious? Like, you guys do know you're the police, right? We had to keep quiet and hide most of the time so that no one outside the house knew how many people live there, he shares. The children would regularly perform sing-or-dance routines in restaurants, schools, and aged care residences, sometimes for people of influence. You notice that, you guys? These kids that are being abused, performing for people of influence. We would have to go out and sell cassette tapes and posters created by the group in order to raise funds for daily life. So basically the children were supporting them. Again, it's always the same, isn't it? Always the same. Oh boy. And to send money back to the leaders. So the children are making the living. Another inversion. If we weren't selling or performing, we were practicing. Kind of like those child Scientology performance groups. Nobody knows anything though, do they? A sinister reality. While the church painted a picture of devotion to God and each other, the reality was a sinister world dominated by physical and sexual abuse. Joe's physical abuse was constant, with beatings and other punishments, able to be administered by any adult who lived within the home. And let's just think Scientology has a child abuse written into the policies, which should be prosecutable by law. You could be punished for things as slight as running down the stairs, laughing too loud, being foolish, playing too energetically. Well, being a kid. Basically just being a kid is what you're getting punished for. Not doing what you were asked to do immediately or to the standard deemed fit. Guys do know that abuse and narcissism goes hand in hand, right? If something happened and one of the kids wouldn't fess up, we could all be lined up and hit. That's mass punishment. With fly swats, wooden spoons, paddles, bamboo, belts, anything. Sometimes the welts and marks left from spankings had to be covered up. With longer clothing, even in summer, when we went out busking and fundraising. Don't people wonder what kids are doing out on the street? Don't people wonder? I mean, maybe they can't help. Maybe they want to help. I don't know. We lived in fear and constantly tread on eggshells. Then there was a sexual abuse. Of course there was. You guys know this is a pedophile cult. Children of God, they tried to change their name so people couldn't find their history. Sexual abuse perpetrated under the guise of showing love, as instructed by God. What is the reason in Scientology? So far, I haven't heard them come up with some dogmatic reason for raping all the children, which they do freely in the satanic cults. And there's more to that. I don't want to go into it. We existed in a heavily sexually charged environment. That's abuse. With sex being taken as love. And God was love. So withholding sex from someone meant you were holding back God's love from them. See, this is how they destroy the boundaries. Which meant you thought you were better than God. Fertilizer. Because so many church members lived within the church-run living quarters, often up to 8 large families with 5 or more children, coerced sexual interactions. That's called rape, by the way. So let's just get the terms straightened out, because rape is still a word. It's a word. It's an act of violence, forcing a child who's not ready for these types of things. Forcing a child against his or her will, that's rape. Coerced rape interactions were frequent. But according to Joe, the worst sexual exploitation took place during what was known as romantic nights or sharing nights. These nights involve prearranged sexual interactions where children under 12 were split into 2 age categories, while those over 12 were considered adults for the purpose of sexual conduct. Were considered adults, like children in adults in children's bodies. Little kids would run around with nothing but see-through piece of cloth wrapped around them, while the bigger kids would be paired off with each other by an adult. Oh my God. And ordered to perform sexual acts on each other. I was once paired with a 9-year-old girl and a 10-year-old girl when I was just 8 years old. By age 11, the church would begin training Joe to be included in adult sexual interactions. He was chosen by a 30-year-old woman who would go on to sexually abuse him under the guise of preparation. You guys, I don't know if you ever heard the story. I think I touched on it here. I have a video on the gentleman that was from the Children of God cult. And this other kid, I can't think of his name, had a Spanish name. He was groomed for the same thing from an older woman who was his nanny. And that wasn't bad enough. They took pictures. There was which is child pornography, by the way. And then they spread these pictures of him with the nanny into these books and said something to the effect of, this is how you show Jesus love, or something like that. And this kid went on. He escaped because they wanted to groom him to be the cult leader. And he went on to, unfortunately, unalive himself. But not before taking out the nanny, so she wouldn't do it to more boys. She probably saved or or he probably saved a lot of little boys from going through that again. Sexual abuse was constant, systematic, and systemic. The group has always defended itself by saying it was a few rotten apples, but this is 100% untrue. And it's still going on. One of the guys from the Fleetwood Mac band is in this cult. I can't think of his name right now. They even put out publications in the early days teaching people how to show God's love to their child. That's just what I was talking about. Which was essentially instruction on how to groom and abuse children. So I didn't say any of the words that YouTube doesn't like, and this was not too explicit. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.